Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and a psychological astrologer. And I'm so delighted because an old friend is back. It's Kathryn Hudson to talk to us about angels. Hello, Kathryn.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on, Isabel. You know I love to come see you and visit with the people that are following you.
It's a delight, and I don't know how it happened, but last time I never looked at your chart, so I thought, well, no time like the present. And well, do you know, as I was about to ask you when you were born,
Yes.
I was thinking about the emphasis on angels and the association between angels and heaven, and I just thought Aquarius. And lo
and you called that
light,
one.
the very light energy. It's something I associate with Aquarius. And there it is. You are indeed an Aquarius. And you have Jupiter and Venus in Aquarius also. And so it makes me think of, things that I've been reading, where you're talking about living life in a very large, open way, and it's all about being optimistic. And this is so Jupiterian and so Aquarius. It's that whole notion that anything is possible. Imagine it, and it's there, and it's within your grasp. That's what it is, that Aquarian energy at its best.
Mm-hmm. It is absolutely that. It is absolutely my outlook, and I would add that it's also the outlook of the angelic realm, seeing things beyond what appears to be the limitations of the 3D world around us. Life is much more fun from that perspective.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I know that you weren't always in this particular field with crystals, working with angels. So I think we better tap a little bit and say that the reason that Kathryn was here, if you missed it, and you can go and look for it, is the wonderful interview we did on crystals, which has transformed yet another aspect of my life, which is brilliant.
How wonderful is that? How wonderful.
So now, this tremendously optimistic and open energy that we see here with the sun so close to Jupiter and Venus in Aquarius, it's also in the 9th house, which, let's have fun with it and say it's the house of God.
That's a nice way to put it.
Now, I'm going to do a lot of explaining. Otherwise, astrologers watching will be tearing out their hair. So what I mean by that is that it's the house we associate with religion in that strict sense. But what we need to do is peel back what religion is about. Because what religion is about is a quest for meaning.
That's right.
And so there are people with very strong 9th houses who, let's say, pursue science. But it's science as in wanting to pull back the veil and see what's behind there. So it's still that drive for meaning. If you're looking for the theory of everything, as some do, then what you're doing is you're looking for what in old times would have been called, you're looking for God. It's just a different perspective, a different language, a different paradigm that you're doing it through. But this is what the 9th house invites us to do, is to look at the world in a very wide place and then to look for meaning.
I just love that the way that you put that, because isn't that behind all stretching and all yearning and all seeking, whether it's scientific or religious? And the different religions, God bless them all, but aren't they simply cultural expressions of our quest? Yeah, exactly. Love that. So that there's Jupiter and Venus in there with this openness. That's poetic, isn't it? Because
it is.
And if anything is important to me, it's blowing all of the doors off and and opening it as wide as one could possibly imagine. So beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, there's more, because this is also the house that we most associate with travel. So at a more mundane level, this is another way in which we want to expand our horizons, and it's by getting to know the world in which we live. And so people with sun in the ninth often end up living in foreign parts, as you have done. And with Venus there, it might be, that it's meeting somebody from a foreign place that takes you there. So now everyone's heard the American accent, and
Yeah.
there's saying that that's where you are, but that's not where you are. Where are you?
No, I'm very French these days. I'm in Paris. So I've been living in France for almost 20 years now. And while it was not a man that brought me here, there is a man that showed up while I was here. But really the desire to travel and the desire to live overseas, and specifically in France, was within me, even as a kid from the Bronx, where I grew up. Even though there were no French people around, and we were Irish, so there really wasn't any logic to it.
Well, it's, I think, fair to say that with Venus ruling your 12th house, a house that we associate with past lives, karma, etc., it could be that you're revisiting an old stomping ground of a past life.
I just love that, because the first time I came to France, and the desire was imprinted upon me, but the first time I got here, and here in Paris specifically, there were streets that I knew, and I had no way of knowing them. So I confirm what you're reading. Absolutely, that's wild.
So that's one side of you, which is extremely strong. But there is another side also in Aquarius. I mean, you have a lot of Aquarius because having said that, you've got the Sun, Venus, and Jupiter conjunct in the 9th house in Aquarius. I'm now looking at Mercury, Mars, and Saturn also in Aquarius in the 8th house. So now the 8th house is as dark as the 9th house is light. Put it that way, because it's through the 8th house that we encounter the place where we put the skeletons that we don't want anyone to see. It's those dark secrets, those impulses, the shadow, our shadow that we don't want to acknowledge exists, etc. And there's quite a lot. Those are very important placings there, and Saturn requires that you go there and that you get very familiar with it and that you then do something about it. Interestingly, it's also the house that we associate with banking and finance.
I'm just loving this reading, but I did not know that all of that was in there. So yeah.
Oh, yes. So tell us how you relate to this.
So on every level. So first of all, I was a banker. I became a banker with the intention of getting myself sent to France eventually. It's the only reason I became a banker. I lied in the interview. I told them I wanted to make money for them. It was just terrible. But so I did that job for over 20 years before they finally did send me to France. The reason that it took so long is I was exploring all aspects of shadow for a very long time. I grew up in a difficult context and had a good bit of anger around it. And I'm Irish, so there was some self-anesthesia going on with that. There was a lot of alcohol around me when I was growing up. I grew up in the Bronx in the 70s, so there were a lot of drugs around me when I was growing up. And really, I went through a period that was anything but life affirming, and really plunged. I talk about it very openly in my books. I really, plunged and explored those places and met those people and felt kinship with them, even as I knew what I was doing wasn't in alignment with my highest. It was my period of na, 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 even as I knew that I was being called to do something else. So I feel like those passages, both in the bank and those dark passages, but bank's pretty dark too, as far as I'm concerned, but those passages have made me so much more effective and efficient, because the work that I do, you know, the people who have already found their alignment and their shine, they don't need me. I'm ideally situated for accompanying people who are coming through darkness, a lack of access to their own light and their own shining. So I love this reading. That's wild. Yes. Yeah. That's me. It's like stunning.
I think, you know, many of the myths, in fact, I can't think of one where this isn't true, where there's that movement into the darkness, or sorry, where there's that movement into the light, involves going through the darkness first and coming up. So this is an incredibly important archetypal story. And the reason it's so important is because it's so true for all of us. Because however our darkness is defined, if we want to find the light, we have to go through it. We can't skip winter. We have to go through winter to get to spring and summer. And I'm sure that there are parallels in climates that are not, you know, as seasonal as the 4 seasons. So there is that important process. And I think your chart talks very much about that needs to go through that process. With Saturn there, you have no option. You can't avoid it, because at some point you're going to be left on your knees and you're going to have to do something to come back up.
It's absolutely the case. Now, while I never quite got to my knees, there were many pretty close places. And, you know, the fact that an angel walked into a bank to give me a crystal to kind of knock me upside the head and wake me up, a crystal that was given to me to help me with my addictions, just shows that there was not of course, there was the possibility of delaying the inevitable, but at some point, aren't we all pulled or pushed to do that work of standing up and finding our shining, finding our light? But yeah, it's really remarkable that there's both darkness and banking in that space, because going through that helped me to emerge stronger, truthfully. But of course, you know, when you're in the thick of it, you don't really know how the story's going to go.
You don't. And in fact, today I invited you on to talk about angels, because your book, Inviting Angels into Your Life, I have been I've been reading it and enjoying it hugely. So I guess maybe the best thing to do is to begin with, what exactly are angels?
Thank you so much for starting that way, because it's the first thing I do whenever I talk, whenever I'm invited to speak someplace, because there are a lot of different utilizations of this word, and I use it in a very specific way. In my sense, an angel is an expression of source or God, and not an intermediary that flies back and forth to plead on our behalf. We don't need an intermediary, as we're children of source ourselves. But we do need facilitation sometimes. So an angel is actually an expression of source. That is, we're not just dropped off here on the earth and left to our own devices and abandoned. There is an accompaniment. So I like the imagery of thinking of an angel as a source or God, if you will, extending the hand down into the density of the earth plane to facilitate our access to that accompaniment. So through the portal of an angel, we have access to the all that is source or God. The guardian presences are the angels that were there when our form was chosen by the soul that was willing to come into the game. And so they know us better very often than we do know ourselves. I bet mine knew that chart. But effectively, this makes them exceedingly beneficial accompaniers. I'm speaking French in my head, it's terrible. But they're just great coaches and guides and help all around. So that's the individual or the guardian presence. Then to go beyond that, there are also the archangels, which are once again source or God expressing, but these are points of connection with particular qualities of source, God. So Archangel Michael is the power of the love of God. Raphael is the healing of God. So what I love about that is I'm thinking of my mother, very Irish and dramatic, saying, "Oh God, give me some strength." As we 7 kids were running around her in our apartment in the Bronx, the poor thing. And though she did not know to call on Michael, Michael would have been the answer. So these angels, the angelic realm around us, is the loving accompaniment of a source or a God that knows us, created us, keeps us if we allow that, and loves us very deeply. So what I love about angels as a path, because there are many paths to finding again who we are truly, is that there's that personal touch. It fills a thirst for being seen and known and loved.
Does something else too. It makes God relatable.
Absolutely.
Because beyond biblical images or sort of new agey vastness images, how can we relate to something that's referred to as source or oneness? And for most of us, in order to have a relationship, it's a lot easier if there's a face on that relationship.
Absolutely.
If there's something that we can comprehend. And so if what we're saying is that angels are the different faces of God.
I love that, yes.
Then that means that they are a means of connecting with God.
Absolutely. From our perspective, how can we possibly personally cultivate a relationship with that which is all that is, including us? It boggles the mind. We're not equipped for it. And this is why I say it was such a generous act to extend the hand of the angelic hand to help us to actually create relationship, create communication. And the book is really that. It's how can I communicate with the angels, which are trying so hard to communicate with us all the time. Yeah.
So in your mind, because you've talked about guardian angels.
Yes.
So in your mind, what is the difference between an individual's spirit guides and a guardian angel?
Thank you for the question. And the book does go into those definitions. Although, depending on who the guide is, they might be all part of everything. It's all part of the same source. So the difference would be the following. As I said, an angelic accompaniment is source, pure God, having had no lifetimes behind it, where a spirit guide, any guide in general, would have had its own voyage behind it, even if it is a guide that's an ascended master, so had the voyage and then realigned with the highest. There is a voyage there, and that's the difference. And it's also why it's so interesting to cultivate both type of connections, because there are specific reasons we're attracted to a given guide. And so yeah, I do talk about that. In general, the way that we connect with angels will also facilitate our connection with spirit guides. But I do like to maintain the difference, to be clear about the difference.
They feel different.
Absolutely.
So they feel different. So, I mean, my personal experience of this is that, and keeping in mind that I am still very new at this is still very new. My experience is that my guides present themselves as people who lived here. And I guess I'm very clearly, they've chosen one life form,
Yes.
which they are choosing to present themselves as. And I'm not seeing the whole of their lifetimes. And they each bring in different lessons that they're working with me, on which they're working with me. I have had the delightful surprise and extraordinary privilege of the presence of, I believe it was Archangel Michael, because that's how he presented himself as Archangel Michael, on 2 separate occasions. And before he said anything, or before I knew who he was, I knew it had to be an angel, because the light. So how I would describe it is that this is a being of extraordinary light. And so that's the power behind it, is this extraordinary light. And that's how I feel the difference.
Yes.
An angelic presence and my own guides. And I think that might be helpful for people who are watching and who are wondering, and how does that feel? That's how my experience of it.
Right. And thank you so much for sharing it. I love also that you were very precise. It's your experience of it. In fact, and many have this experience. Of course, I shouldn't say of course, there is vast, brilliant light beyond what we can even grapple with our head. But depending on our instrument, and our bodies are instrument, for each of us, we're going to experience these things differently. So there are people that don't see any light, but will feel very differently the energy of an archangel as opposed to a guide. And even among the guides, because there are certain frequencies or certain energies that are specifically connecting with you. There are guides that are ascended masters and have already reached the point zero, one could say, and there are guides who themselves are still voyaging. So some feel, some have the wonderful, I mean, isn't it a blessing, that experience of that great light. Some hear, and then others, interestingly, it's intuitive. They just know. It's not said to them, but it's planted in them, as if, I don't know why I know, but I know that it was Michael, for example. So one of the things that I think is so important is to not fall into the trap of comparing ourselves. Well, Anna Isabel's, so there was no light, so it couldn't have been Michael. I'm just kidding myself. Well, no. In fact, the idea of the book is to, okay, how does my instrument work? Where are my gifts today? Because they do open, and eventually they can be wide open for all of us.
They open and they change too.
Absolutely. There's an evolution.
Because it's, how I experience these things today is not how I experienced them when I first started. And all I can say is it's getting harder. I think it's getting harder because I think they're pushing me, to develop more. And so it's getting harder at one level, in that I'm not seeing like I used to see. I'm not hearing like I used to hear. and I'm feeling less than I used to feel. So from that point of view, because I was used to that, that was great.
I love it. Yeah.
What's happening is that it's becoming more telepathic. It's changing. So it's harder from the point of view that what I knew, what I expected is kind of vanishing and occasionally coming back in. But instead something else is replacing it, which actually I think in some respects is easier. But the reason it makes it harder is because I have to trust it more.
And trust yourself more.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's that initial, where you can imagine being on a mountaintop in the air. Those experiences that give us, that whet the desire to move forward. And then once we're hooked, but of course your experience is specific, but there's also this this echoing of many who innocently it's visited upon us, and then afterward when we set our intention to it, we are absolutely cultivated. And like going to a gym where we're cultivating muscles, we go through breaking down and then building up in new ways. But yeah, it's amazing, but I understand completely.
Yeah, I think that it's a wonderful thing, because it's almost as though I feel that I have teachers who are going, okay, she's getting quite good at this, but there's a bit of weakness here. Let's help her in this respect. And so, and I think that's exactly what it feels like to me. It feels as though every time I get good at something, they go, okay, time to work on something else. And so there's this, it feels very much intentional.
Yeah,
that's what
like
it
an
feels.
apprenticeship.
Yeah,
Coordinated.
Case it feels that that there's a lesson plan. Having been a teacher myself, I recognize this. There's a lesson plan here, and there's a goal and a target, and I might not be very clear on what it is, but they certainly are, and they're guiding me in that direction. And so this is the beauty when you begin to open and work with angels, with guides. It's an exciting journey, and I thank you so much for your encouragement for all of us, to do that. So how did your journey begin?
Well, I would say when I was very young, I sensed and saw and heard, and I was very open, very, very young. But as I mentioned, the context was very difficult. And so I closed myself down, as so many of us do. When one is very sensitive, we find ways to shut down or diminish that sensitivity. And so really, I just had been too long hiding from that which was the obvious evolution of these gifts. And it really was the day that that woman or that angel walked into the bank and handed me this. That was the wake-up call. Not just to stop drinking. That was ancillary, to stop hiding. And so once I recognized what that visit was, as shaken up as I was by it, there was an openness and a willingness for everything to change. And so the question that I asked, so I coach a lot of people to help open their gifts. And the question I do ask very often is, how willing are you that everything changed? And there we meet up with some of our darkness as well. So once I was willing to open that door to change, and I was starting to look around, the world, they organize things for us, don't they? So I found a new job in a bank, but this bank wanted to send me to Europe, to France. And I was here when I started opening. I was here when I did my Reiki training. So though that original meeting was in New York, where I came from, I was brought back to this absolutely karmic, these encounters and this healing space. And really, once I dipped my toe in the Reiki waters, I was training with a shaman in Mexico. I was doing all this crazy, wonderful, wild stuff. And I had pretty much decided to leave the bank that had sent me over here, and I heard, wait a year. So I listened. So I waited a year, and a year later, the bank that had me under contract here in France was having difficulties. They decided to close almost all of their foreign offices, including Paris. And so it was they that broke my contract and not me that broke it, as it would have been. So they had to pay me. And then I had the money to live and explore and learn. And so I completely agree with you that they organize things for us, because had I not listened to that, voice out of nowhere, wait a year, but I know to listen. But had I not listened, I would have missed that boat and things would have been more difficult. So from the very beginning, there was that. Now, with regard to angels specifically, I went and trained with Doreen Virtue, who at that time had written many of the books and the cards and all of that stuff. She was very present on the market, and a book fell off a shelf in an airport kind of thing. Yeah. So I went to Hawaii, because it was, after all, Hawaii. And I said, well, even if it's a crazy thing and I don't like it, I'll sit by the door and I'll go swim with dolphins if I don't like it. And I didn't leave. I stayed. And that day was that week was very, very opening. I was pretty cynical, but I was feeling and seeing and experiencing things that I had never allowed myself to do consciously on purpose. And that really began the rest of it. Crazy world. Love it.
So what is the first thing that you would recommend for someone who is watching and has never had any thoughts about angels beyond them being kind of biblical or fairy tale? They want to let an angel into their life. What do they do?
I love this question. So the first thing I want to say is that I have a student who's a 73-year-old priest. And he always said, we don't really talk about angels at church. We really don't, except for Hark the Herald Angels Sing. But the way I always suggest when I do a talk is to simply invite them, set the intention, okay, if you exist, show me a sign. And contrary to what Sister Mother Consolation in Catholic school told me, Catherine Marie, you can't ask for proof. You have to take it on faith. You don't need to understand it. And I knew that wasn't true. In fact, the angels are delighted. They're waiting. They're waiting for us to ask, because our free will is respected. But it's like they're waiting. Everybody's got the guardian angels that are kind of like waiting to be asked. And the moment we ask, so what the beauty is, we don't even have to believe in them. All we have to do is ask, and ask consciously. So easiest thing is, okay, angels, if you're there, show me. And then watch, stay present and watch for signs, for songs, for feathers, for coins in unlikely places. The beauty is you'll know the sign when you hear or you see it. Your heart will focus on it and skip a beat. And then the double confirmation is right afterward. Probably the head's going to say, oh, but of course there are feathers, there are birds. So both the heart saying yes and the head saying no, it's the double whammy of confirmation. And I would argue from then, why not get my book or any training that you're guided to? You'll know what's right for you, but there are certain techniques to open the channel and render it more fluid, to recognize our gifts and become confident in ourselves as quickly as possible, to leave the experts, even if I'm one of them, and find the expert within us, within you. Yeah, these are the helpful hints I would give right away. But just beginning with, ask and it will be given.
And I would add, ask and be open. Because there are so many times when there are just these little things that happen. And if you just go, oh, I wonder, instead of not paying attention or dismissing it, just leave that door open. I think what happens is that more comes and it builds until finally you go, that's a bit of a coincidence, and that's a coincidence, and then it doesn't seem like it's normal anymore, but it feels more magical because these things build. But you have to kind of have your eyes open and your eyes and your heart open.
Absolutely. It's that's exactly what I meant by staying present. So if I'm thinking about the past and something that went wrong, or I'm worrying about the future, I'm going to miss them. So the key is the two have to go lockstep. Ask, and then kind of wait or expect, pay attention to what will happen after that. What I love to say is that it seems illogical or not normal until experience after experience, proof after proof, sign after sign. One day I was asked on a radio interview here, the guy asked me, well, to what percent are you sure about this stuff? And I said, thanks for the question, 100%. And it wasn't always that way. In the beginning, it was like, what? Okay, well, let's just see. And so that confidence, both in them, but also in us, grows with that experience. Yeah, staying open. Absolutely. You called it.
What is, this is going to be, I think, the toughest question of them all.
Okay.
What is your favorite thing about angels or working with angels?
So can I say two things? Working with angels, with other people, my very favorite thing is when I witness people who come to the awareness that they are really accompanied and loved. And personally, my very favorite thing is from the moment my eyes open, I can feel their presence and love. And I have company all day long. It's really the relationship and the love that's there. Yeah.
I think the last, but perhaps the most obvious question is this. If they're around us, how can bad things happen to us?
We're not living in Disneyland. So the soul has committed to a life here on the earth plane where, we can't be here talking about the highest level of light, angels, without recognizing that here on earth, our experience is there's a whole schedule from highest to lower energies. And we agreed to come into this world of contrast to pass through and transmute and transform, to experience, to grow. And of course, certainly for you, for us, and probably the people watching this, also to share that light so that others might also. What I find is it makes easier the experiences that are so difficult. And of course, there are very difficult experiences here on the earth. There are so many of them happening even now, but individually also, I find that higher perspective, that clarity that this is one lifetime of many, is really, really very helpful and helps me to stay out of the holes that are on the path where you can fall into and not see and fall into despair. So, of course, I didn't have that access at the beginning, but now that I have, the drama has been released largely.
When we're going through very difficult times and our friends are powerless to change that for us, one of the most valuable things that friends and family do is witness and hold us in their love to help us get through that difficult time. And I think that's a nice way of thinking about what angels are doing when we're in the dark times. But they're doing it perhaps at a soul level. They're witnessing what our soul is experiencing and learn and holding that space for us. And as soon as we are ready to invite them in, then they begin to work with us to help us turn things around. I think that's possibly my best way of seeing it. And I think very much what you're saying is that because we have free will, they're not here to fix things for us or answer wishes or rescue us, in fact. But they are here, as you said it, to make things as easy as possible for us, you know. You know, my dad passed 2 years ago. A friend of mine just made me dinner and dropped it off. You know, she couldn't change what happened, but she did something very simple that was so meaningful that I'm talking about it now. And because it really touched me that she had done that. She said, well, you know, you've got a lot on, perhaps, you know, it's one less thing to think about.
Yeah. And isn't that the sustenance of love?
Exactly. And I that's what we draw on from our guides and our guardian angels and archangels. And I guess what we're saying yet again is be comforted if you're going through a very dark time. You're not alone. Ask for help.
Absolutely. And isn't it wonderful to notice that our sustenance in those times is the witnessing and the love on all levels. So it's not just our spirit guides, our angels, but also our the souls that are humanly accompanying us. Just a love fest, and that shoring us up from within until we're ready to move forward. Beautiful.
Now, I'm sure it didn't go unnoticed that you said an angel walked in and gave you a crystal, which implies a human form. So, Kathryn, are you holding out on us? What's going
on? So it was a woman. In my memory, I can see her form and the hat she was wearing. I cannot see her face. I haven't never been able to recall her face. And this envoy with this message changed the trajectory of my life. That was the wake-up call. If I had not listened, there would have been others. Okay, but this was the big one. And so often I'm asked the question, well, so was this your guardian angel? What's up with this? And for me, I'm not big on analysis, but I am big on clarity and knowing. So either this was a guardian angel that was, because they watch out for us and they keep us they can't intervene unless we are putting ourselves at physical harm with risk of death. And I was doing a lot of crazy stuff that did that. So there were interventions. I think they either just got tired and said, let's just go in and make this clear and finish this crazy period. It's possible. Yeah, it's possible. Thank you. Or they sent someone who had a channel so clear that she walked into a bank in the middle of Manhattan across from Grand Central Station. And despite every effort, and I made some effort not to deal with her, I was hungover. I didn't want any clients that day. She persisted and delivered this message. I will add that by the time, because I was nonplussed, of course, and my mind was reeling, trying to figure out what this was going on, by the time I lifted my head, she was already at the door. So absolutely an angelic visitor. And perhaps just my angel's form. I think that if it were a person, I would remember her face. But at any rate, I know where the message came from. Yeah.
That's just fabulous. And I I saved that question for last because I figured it would be the best incentive possible to get everybody reading and finding out more about angels. And no better place to start than in this with this wonderful book, Inviting Angels into Your Life. And so, Kathryn, thank you so much. If people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
So I do daily angel messages, a minute-long video every day on Insta and on Facebook. And my website is Kathryn Hudson, Kathryn Hudson, like the river, .fr. Reach out. I do sessions and classes, and would love to hear from you if you do pick up the book. But I hope that the incentive that we're ending with is the incentive to ask and stay present, because that's the most important move forward possible. And yay in advance.
Well, I will be putting a link to the book and to your website as well.
Oh, thank you.
So in the description box. And no doubt we will see you again. So thank you. And thank you all for watching. And next time, we're going to be looking at the shamanic story in Genesis. Until then, goodbye.